Hi, my name's Rebecca from conquerbooks.com, and today we are talking about Wanders, What Happened in July. So, as you probably know if you're tuning in, this is Chuck Wendig's pandemic book that came out in 2019, and there's a lot of eerie similarities, and it's a really interesting thing to read during this time. So, I've been reading it in real time. The book actually starts in the month of June, so I read June. Now, in July, read all of the chapters that took place in July. And there's something special about reading a book in real time that you just get a sense of, some of the time and the place that the book is referencing. If you are looking for a spoiler-free review of Wanderers, Nicole and I did one last year when it came out. I'll link to that below, and you can check that out on the Conquer Books YouTube channel. If you are just catching up with this, be sure to watch the June video first, where we kind of give a snapshot of what happens in the June chapters and how it relates to what's happening with us in real life. So this is all about Wanderers, what happened in July. Lots of spoilers. So July really takes place in part 3 and most of part 4 of this book. This is a hefty book, and July, a lot goes down. We get a lot of world building, we get a lot of details filled in, and so it makes up a good portion of the book. The sleepwalkers, this infected flock of people who just wake up one day and just leave their homes and they're just walking across America. They make it all the way from Iowa to Wyoming in this section of the book. And the characters that we opened up with, Shanna and Nessie, are still here, of course. Nessie is the sleepwalker, and she cannot engage with her world. She really has no choice but to keep walking forward. She gives no sign of real cognitive life within her, but Shanna, her sister, she can't leave Nessie, so she has to adapt to a new normal. And I know that rings a bell with a lot of us who are, in the midst of this never before seen pandemic. We've all had to adapt to a new normal. So for Shanna, what that looks like is her father is driving this RV, a long pace with the flock, but he's not really engaged. It's kind of too much emotionally for him to, really plug into what's going on. And so it's up to Shanna. Shanna's the one who has to check on Nessie. She brushes her hair, she talks to her, but Nessie, of course, doesn't respond or engage. It's, one-sided. Shanna has to look beyond Nessie to try and find meaning in her life right now. She starts dating a guy from the CDC, so it gives Shanna an interesting snapshot into what life is like for the CDC officials that are walking, shepherding the flock along their route across America. And one thing Shanna really does is she starts to get involved with her photography. She's been an amateur photographer, but she's been encouraged to take it a little bit more seriously, and she starts posting photos to Instagram about what it really is like within the flock to try and give Americans and the world watching a picture of humanity within this crisis. And she starts to think like a photojournalist, and it's hard for her because she's never been good at something, not the way that her younger sister Nessie is. But she finds some meaning in it. She finds a way to, bring purpose into her day. So we get their story we're following along with. We have one new point of view character, and that's Pete Corley, Rock God. He's one of my favorite characters, and I kind of think of him like the old rock star in Love Actually. He has a past, has a history, incredibly famous and popular and accomplished, but he's kind of washed up. And what is next for Pete Corley is a reunion with his old band, and he is not enthusiastic about that at all. Like, he can't think of anything worse. And so what does a rock star do? They go where the cameras are, and the cameras right now are with this sleepwalking flock. And so Pete Corley goes, and he's interested in getting his moment of fame, and he doesn't really believe in what he's doing, but he's like, yeah, I'm here to protect them, and like, I'm one of the crew, I'm one of the gang, but he just is looking for eyes on him again. But during this time, so the CDC has been with the flock this entire time because America is kind of operating under the assumption that these members of the flock have been infected with some kind of virus or disease. What else would make a person behave that way? However, the president is getting increasing pressure to put Homeland Security in charge, and many members of the American public are operating from a place of fear, and they want the military to move in. And so that's just what happens. The president gives the word, the military tells all the shepherds that they need to evacuate peacefully or they will be forcibly evacuated. And this is a big moment for Shanna as this, person who's found purpose in photojournalism, like to take pictures of what is happening. And Pete Corley and Shanna's stories intersect here because Pete Corley is at like the front of the group, and like he can't let on that he's scared and that he has no idea what's going on, and he just is at the front with his guitar, and like he's being a rebel, and like the media is going crazy like watching this happen, this big celebrity and this big huge never before seen event. And the army is scared too, and Shanna can see it in their eyes that they are terrified to be this close to these sleepwalkers. But then, as the army is wont to do, they set that aside and do what they've been told is their duty, and they start removing sleepwalkers. And there's a gunshot, and Shanna gets this moment of a soldier beating Pete Corley. And she is able to then like give that photo to the networks, and that kind of becomes a tipping point back to the other side. Suddenly, the population's opinion of the military taking over this isn't so popular. The president has to backtrack a little bit, and the CDC is allowed to stay in charge of this event. That all is happening with this whole cast of characters, but this is a pretty big book with a lot of characters, a lot of side stories. And one of the side stories that's going on is with Pastor Matthew. So if you remember, Pastor Matthew is somebody who's maybe lost his way a little bit. He's been introduced to Ozark, who is this, dominating man who is essentially trying to get him to say that these sleepwalkers are of the devil and we should, take them out, and get some righteous permission from the pastor for, doing whatever he and his crew want to be doing. And Pastor Matthew gets a lot of fame suddenly by being a religious leader who speaks out against the sleepwalkers. He has financial gains from this. It is a presidential election year, and so the opposing candidate invites him to come and speak at one of his rallies. And so this has been kind of a game changer, but Pastor Matthew is increasingly distraught at what he finds himself saying, what people are putting into his mouth, and he feels like he has to finally take a stand and try and back away from this. But once you're in with Ozark, there's no backing away. And so Ozark is probably one of the darkest characters. Like, he has his own justifications. He is a well-rounded villain in a book. But yeah, he is the person to watch because he wields incredible power for being this, supposedly average guy. And he influences a lot of people to take up arms against the walkers. So, it is a pandemic book, and we get a lot of details in this section about what this pandemic actually is, what the virus is, what the sickness is doing to people. So these are probably the biggest spoilers coming up ahead. So Black Swan is the AI character, the artificial intelligence computer, and he reveals a conversation to Benji. And Black Swan, people have been operating under the assumption that Black Swan is kind of neutral, that Black Swan is just trying to help humanity, that Black Swan is open about what Black Swan knows. But we get the sense that this AI character is kind of going rogue. It's doing things based on some overarching principle compared to, the humans around it. And so Black Swan outs a character to Benji in terms of her involvement with the walkers. She knows more than she's letting on, and she knows why the walkers are behaving the way that they are. And Black Swan gives Benji a copy of this phone conversation, essentially to force Benji, who is a CDC, well, a disgraced CDC official, into figuring out, really delving into this mystery, trying to figure out why the walkers are crossing America. And there's two things going down related to, we think, illnesses. So there's the sleepwalkers. That is like the bigger thing in the book that all eyes are watching this. But then there's also something else happening simultaneously that doesn't really catch the eye of the media. It doesn't catch the eye of the CDC until it's a little bit too late. And that's the death of Jerry Garland from a fungus called white mask. And we find out that Black Swan is not concerned about the sleepwalkers. Black Swan is concerned about this white mask fungus disease that killed Jerry Garland and is, spreading, but humanity hasn't quite caught up. We're looking in the wrong place. And this is where we find out that Black Swan, the AI computer, is actually controlling the flock of sleepwalkers via nanotechnology, because Black Swan sent itself a message from the future that humanity is going to collapse and expire. And now Black Swan is trying to save a small population of humans from this deadly fungus. So the CDC had already noted that everybody walking in the flock is extraordinarily healthy and above average smart, and like a perfect demographic breakdown of race and age and other backgrounds. And so now this comes clear that Black Swan has been selecting people. They're not sick. They've been infected with nanotechnology, tiny microscopic robots in their body that is controlling them, making them walk forward. But Black Swan is doing this to try and save humanity from white mask. So here's the fun, horrifying pandemic stuff about white mask. It has a super long incubation period, 3 months to 6 months. It's highly contagious. It has a 100% mortality rate, and people not only die from this disease, but because the fungus grows in your brain and it slowly protrudes out of your nostrils, you have symptoms of dementia weeks before you die. And the symptoms are probably what are going to kill you first, because you're not taking care of your body. You're not, behaving like a normal person. Let me give you a snapshot of what that sounds like in the book. The story was this. The fungal pathogen was real. The CDC was aware of 52 new infections, but that was just the top quarter inch of a massive iceberg still submerged and unseen. The disease would advance over the next 6 months. Really, it had already advanced, already infected so many, it just hadn't been seen yet. The pathogen was hiding in plain sight, and by the start of the new year, the majority of humankind would be dead or dying. Civilization would have already fallen. It was a mass extinction event. So a lot of this book and a lot of the virus and disease elements are based off of things that are actually happening in our world. Not, the COVID-19 pandemic, but mass extinction of animals, white nose syndrome in bats that kills off, I think it's 40% of bats that are infected. There's, that famous parasitic fungus in ants that causes ants to climb up a tree or get higher, and then the fungus explodes out of its head and infects ant colonies, and it helps keep balance within rainforests. But because there's all of these little droplets in here of things that actually happen in real life and that we know scientifically, that's what makes this book so alarming and so scary, because there's so many real things in it paired with this, imagined pandemic. So fortunately, our pandemic is a lot less frightening than this one. Even as frightening as it is, it doesn't compare to the mind of a deranged writer. But it's a little bit similar in that people with COVID-19 are spreading it before symptoms appear, and that's what really makes this book so successful in spreading the virus and like causing this like, mass event across the world, is that people are carrying it and people are spreading it without knowing or without showing any symptoms. So a little bit similar to COVID-19 in that you got to wear your mask and you got to stay home. There's also a lot of similarities politically, and in the last video about June, I talked about how this book really serves as a mirror of American life. But in this section with July specifically, there's this battle between the White House and the CDC. Oh dear. Wait, is that in the book or is that in real life? But there's a lot of purposeful misinformation being spread in the book with fake news and, in our real life concerning COVID-19, that it's a hoax, that, wearing masks is dangerous. And so obviously this book was written long before COVID-19 happened. It came out before the pandemic took off. But I think that reading literature is a good way for us to better analyze our world, to see pieces of ourselves in it, to look for possible solutions, to think about the things that really terrify us. And so this is the monthly mask pitch. If you're not already wearing a mask when you go out, now is the time. And it doesn't matter if you haven't been wearing it or you weren't that diligent about wearing it every time. You can always, every day is a new day to wear masks. That's what I'll say. So that's the end of the July summary. We're moving on to August next month. I'll read the August pages, not chapters, August pages in the month of August. It's actually only 4 pages long. And so you go from this huge July section to just this like tiny sliver snapshot of August. So it's a good time to pick up the book now if you haven't already started reading. You definitely can catch up in the month of August. All right, well, I'll see you in August. Bye.